Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is your host Faiza Naqvi in your own program, Meri, Pehchan. I hope and pray that you all are doing well with your families and loved one. May Allah protect you all, give you and bless you with a long, healthy, blessed life and increase your tawfiqat khair. I wish people could understand that the brain is the most important organ of our body. And just because, we can't see the damage we have to our brain, just like the way we see the damage to our physical damage, then it doesn't mean that there is no damage at all. It's very detrimental when we are hurt, when we are broken from inside in our minds, in our thoughts, and in our emotions, when they are affected by different situations, different elements of life, different diseases sometime even, and we don't even understand how to respond to them, and where to go, and what should we look for, and who there to help us. And it's really important to understand our mental state and the changes we have in our personalities and in our words and our actions, and the traits we are experiencing, which are comparatively different from the one we used to have earlier, like maybe 1 or 2 years before, just because our mental health is affected, and we don't even notice it, and it keeps you hurting and damaging you inside. And that's the reason today we have created a special show regarding mental health. And we will talk about the understanding of the mental health, like how important it is for us to understand how is our mental health and what steps should we take to protect it effectively. And because if we talk about, it is easier to build a strong child than to rebuild a broken human being, a broken man, female or woman. So for that matter, we have a wonderful guest with us, and we will move forward to our guest sister Fahima Mohamed, and she is with us. She is like a life coach and a certified NLP and CBT TV presenter, and she is wonderful on the mental health issues, and she is currently studying a master's in psychology as well. So we move forward to our guest. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Fahima. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show, and I'm really grateful for your time, and it's honor to have you with us. And first of all, I would like you to introduce a little more about your experiences you have, and then we'll move forward from there.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alaikum as-salam. Thank you so much for the opportunity and the invitation. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here today. I love the introduction that you did actually say. It's really important actually that you've mentioned about understanding mental health. We talk about different disorders, but we do need to understand a little bit more about how we think and how we feel. About me, I have a degree in business management, and I was working in a law firm as a conveyancer many years ago. Then later, after my own challenges, I actually went into training and qualified as a life coach, and also certified in NLP, and also certified in positive psychology, existential, mindfulness, relationship coaching, and also coaching in businesses and institutes. I also took it further to also be qualified in CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as a mental health and wellness practitioner. I also did the neuroscience program for confidence and of change. And then now I'm studying my master's, as you said, in psychology and neuroscience of mental health. And what I love about that is that it's not just thinking about the mind, it's also bringing in the brain. So it's the brain and the mind, which is very different. And we will discuss that even more, because neuroscience is understanding the function, the anatomy, biology, the science for the actual brain. And the psychology is understanding the actual, the way in which we think, the human behavior, the way in which we have perspective, emotion, and, you know, the narratives, the stories that we say. So bringing it together, this is one of the newest and latest courses that is out there. And I am studying at a very high prestigious university as well. So at the same
Mashallah.
time, this is, you know, research that I'm doing, essays that I'm doing, exams that I'm doing every single 6 weeks for the next 2 years in order to get the latest information around mental health. Yes, I call myself a life coach, but actually my work is much more extensive and deep. My clientele has ranged from relationship issues to goal setting in their businesses to sort of like, you know, with mental health, which is quite severe and detrimental, like suicide, self-harm, OCD. And they range from different ages and also different backgrounds, faith or no faith. I don't sort of like discriminate against who I work with, even if it's male or female. I help all areas and all backgrounds and all genders. So I think as a Muslim woman, I represent in our community and outside the community. I also have my own show and I do my own presenting, and I'm invited on different platforms to speak, even if it's on mainstream channels and radio, in order to give opinions around what's happening today. So yeah, that's
Mashallah.
kind of what I do in a nutshell, really.
That's a wonderful job you are doing, and mashallah, it's really inspiring as well. And I hope and pray for your success as well for further and whatever you want to achieve. May Allah bless you and help you achieve that. Moving forward to our first question, towards why it is important to understand the mental health and how it impacts on our personal life and social life and things like that if we don't understand it. And I mean, if one wants to understand if his mental state is fine or not fine, how would they judge it?
Yeah, very, very good question. It's a very wide question, so bear with me as well when I'm answering it. We're going to look at it from different angles. The history of mental health was that if there was severe schizophrenia or psychosis or, you know, things like that, you know, we would institutionalize individuals, and a lot of those institutions have actually not existed anymore because it has changed over history, where they are bringing out people to heal themselves and work on themselves through therapy or medication in the community. It's what I'm studying currently at the moment, and this is my current module as well with regards to mental health in the community. And it's really important that we do understand that the whole idea of, you know, seeing someone having problems to assess what is normal and what is not and how to make decisions is very different now. Even though the stigma is still there, but we are more open in society to accept the fact that even if you are in that serious mental state, you're not going to be considered completely crazy or mad. There are now different terminology to sort of assess that the individual has maybe a dysfunction in their sort of anatomy, a part of their brain, a circuit, a pathway. So there's lots of research that has been done on animals, especially because, you know, none of the trials can be really done on humans, but a lot of the fMRI scans will show that there can be a lot of diagnosis with regards to what's happening in our brain as humans, so that we can actually assess better as to how we are performing. Now, the way in which we look at mental health, the brain and the mind is very different. We always look at it as being the same, but it's different. And when you want to assess how is it that you understand mental health, you have to understand what is a healthy mind. A lot of us talk about the diagnosis. A lot of us talk about what's wrong. We're not talking about what's right, so we can work towards what is an actual healthy mind. So an actual healthy mind is someone that knows how to cope with challenges, knows how to assess different challenges, know how to make decisions according to certain challenges. Because we know this world, we are not certain about anything that happens, whether you have faith or not. There are given circumstances that occur, and we have to make decisions, whether we are children growing up and developing or as adults. We have to make everyday decisions around how we think, because the way in which we think is the way in which we will speak, the way in which we will behave, and the way in which we'll also build our character. And that is a habit that's created. And then on top of that, we are influenced, right? We are influenced in our thinking by our environment, by our upbringing, by our beliefs, whether it's our core beliefs in faith or just the societal beliefs, right? In community or whatever it may be, or what's the latest trend, those kind of beliefs. And we are also influenced by what is the latest of what's happening right now. Some of us more than others. So how much impact does it have on the individual with regards to your family life, your upbringing? And a lot of studies have shown that certain ages, especially 0 to 7, we are programmed in a particular way. And that program is going to be taking us forward as to how we live as adults. Not to say that there's no chance of changing it if there was, for example, a household which wasn't healthy, or there was trauma, or there was abuse. It still can be unturned. However, when we understand that we're making choices because we are either having a single thought, which is either catastrophizing, for example, we have these functions which are helping us make choices and decisions, right? But when we can't make choices and decisions that actually help us and serve us, then we know that something is not right. But nowadays, we are used to those things because of society. We might say we don't want to be positive because people might think we're arrogant. We don't want to, be positive because maybe it might not happen. But again, research and sciences have shown that in order to get the positive, we need to think positive. And I'm not saying that we have to not understand that there is a chance of it not happening, but where are you going to focus your brain? Are you going to focus on it constantly stressing or worrying? For example, we're here sitting today. It's a live show. I could be stressed thinking about how am I going to perform today, or I can be focusing on my content and my work that I've practiced. And then even with the stress, that's not going to overtake what I'm saying. But if I'm going to have a lot of stress, then that was going to cause anxiety, maybe even a panic attack. And that can stop me because our body responds to the way in which sometimes people argue in the past, to the way in which we feel, or a situation. So our behaviors can be conditioned, and if they can also be learned, but at the same time, they can also be unlearned. I'm talking from theories and philosophers in the past that have actually had many studies with regards to understanding human mind and behavior. And with those studies and trials, this is what I'm talking. It's not my opinion. Unfortunately, a lot of people that when they speak, it's from very lack of knowledge. And I'm a practitioner. I mean, other people may call me, an expert, but I feel that I'm a practitioner because I'm a continuous learning student. And whatever I say is, it's continuous. You will have different therapies which will help you through that process, or you have medication now. But even with that, there's a lot to consider with regards to how does it work with the individual. And we humans are still figuring out the brain. There are still so many functions that we do not know even in science. We don't know how individuals react, and one individual will react and respond differently to another. But these trials are set so that we have a general view as to how people are going to respond to medication, for example, with regards to depression or if there's a lack of something. But a lot of the times what I've known, especially working with my clients, majority of the actual work that I do is done through CBT, NLP, and, helping people to understand their way of thinking. Now, if you think in a way that makes you feel sad for way too long, there are obviously rules and regulations in place. We have the regulatory body which diagnose people, and you are assessed so that you understand if you're feeling like this for so long, then you are either clinically depressed or chronically depressed, because there's different stages. But the question you ask about how do we know is our mental health, understanding it and knowing it's healthy, and when do we take, as an individual, we have to have a little bit of balance with our sleep, with our mood. If we're too much irritated, if we always either gaining too much weight, or losing too much weight, we can't sleep, we can't concentrate. But then as I'm saying this, when I'm talking, today's lifestyle, a lot of us just deal with that. We deal with the stress. We just think it's normal, but we don't realize how much damage it's doing to our body. For example, when people say they're multitasking and they're juggling, especially like women will say, well, I am, doing this, that, and the other, and it's so great. It's actually really damaging to your brain. When you are switching your brain, you are switching, and your nervous system is actually being damaged. Because now we are switching because we're looking at our emails and our phones every few seconds, where before was maybe every minute or two. But that switching is actually damaging your brain. It's depleting. So when I study the brain and studying neuroscience, you can put that in place. And a lot of people say, well, I'm bored and we shouldn't be bored. Did you know if you actually interrupt that boredom by constantly trying to fill your life to have that gap, you are actually losing creativity? Because when you're bored, the mind is resting. It's at a certain frequency, and that's when you become creative. And when parents say that my kid's bored and I have to entertain them, you are taking away the opportunity for them to create and learn for themselves. So all of these things that I'm studying is really vital for everyday living. I'm going to stop there because I can literally talk for the whole show without any interruption, but I know you've got more
No,
questions for
I
me.
was just I was just thinking about the points you have raised, and they are all very important. And we need to understand what is the difference between mental health and the other thing you are talking about. So, I would like to know, what are the kind of mental problems which are very common around us, and is there any difference of you can say ratio in men's and women's? Majority of the time, like most of the time, what we do is we think about the women facing the mental health problems and things like that. So how do you see women and men, are they equally facing the same problem, or they are different, or how do you see it,
With the
and what
studies,
can
with the
yeah,
studies that actually do this, I mean, they can only basically do the research for people that come forward. And there is more reason for women that may come forward. It doesn't mean, though, that when studies are taken, that you can actually say that it's an equal, because they're not taking the entire population, right? And even if they do random sort of trials, it's picking and choosing from different areas. So it's very hard to sort of answer that question. But what I can say generally is that I think it's the way in which women and men respond may be different, but they will definitely have similar feelings to a certain extent. We will all have a different level and degree of dealing and coping and tolerating. And even at the beginning, for example, if there was a breakup in a relationship, now the woman might be really emotional at the beginning and really distraught, because that's her coping mechanism, and that is really common for her to cry, to go and talk to her friends, to even seek help, right? But generally, not all the time, but generally, a man will probably hold and suppress that. Even if they're feeling it, they may not actually express it. So can we say that it's more for men or women? No, we can't. We can say that they cope differently, they react and respond, and sometimes later on, because it is brushed under the carpet, they can't go to maybe their male friends and say, oh, I'm heartbroken. It's different, right? There's a difference.
yes.
So that later on, it might affect them. And that's why we are hearing more of it. And there's more conversation because men are opening up. But I think in our Muslim community, we still have a problem where there isn't enough conversation. And as much as we might talk about it, there's maybe not enough facility. There's not enough people that are even in the community that are looked upon, that they can be reachable to speak about this on a one-to-one basis, so that men feel safe and secure to go and speak about it. But I really do feel that even though our brain is slightly different for men and women, the functions are quite similar. But at the same time, we do have slight differences, but we will respond differently according to how we are raised, how our parents expect us to behave. Men and women, we know, boys and girls are even brought up differently in the household. So they're going to act
Yeah.
differently in the household, right? And they're going to act differently outside. They're not actually brought up in the same way. they have different rules. There's whether it's freedom, whether it's going out, whether it's studies, whether it's seriousness. So there's a lot of factors to consider before even answering that question. And even if you're going to look at the statistics and the research, I look behind the research as to what are they looking at, what angle are they looking at, which community group, which of these trials, and which area are they looking at. So because I've studied a lot of this and I'm still continuing to study it, it's not an easy answer. And even the researchers themselves are continuously investing so that they need to know more about the brain and understand it. But we have developed a lot. We have come to a stage where we understand a lot of the functions that we didn't have before. We've done quite a lot of animal studies where we can see there's certain things that are happening in the animal which is very close to the human brain. And I did an essay about that recently, actually, with regards to OCD and, how the animal model was, the checking and the braining. Because normally, we also use those words very loosely. We'll all say, because someone likes to be clean and tidy, we're like, oh, I'm OCD. But it's an actual, real, detrimental, traumatic experience for someone who really has it. For example, a person that really has OCD, you might have tendencies where you want to keep checking to see if the door's locked. But if you spend an hour or 2 hours doing it, now that's considered and diagnosed as OCD. Or if you're washing your hands constantly because you are, you want to keep clean, you'll be like, oh, I'm OCD. But people that are really suffering from OCD, they will wash it so much that they actually can remove some of the skin off their hand. So there's a seriousness behind saying these words and using these labels. So when we understand that and we realize that, and there's certain things that are happening in your brain that makes you constantly check, constantly wash, where you're never satisfied. And that is really called OCD. And when you read about it, when you research about it, when you learn about it, you will never label yourself like that, just like with depression. Just like, there's chronic depression and there's people that are living with depression, right? Where they can cope, they can manage. They're either doing therapy or they're taking medication. So there's a lot of things involved. We should not put mental health under one umbrella. There's various sections to it. There's various severity towards it. There's a different scale and level to each and every disorder. And there's continuous research with regards to the changes as to what's happening. And already over the last few years, even the diagnosis has changed to a certain extent with certain people, for whatever reason that may be. For example, we've had, lots of people that would have considered being mental health as not able to function and not able to work, but now we can with some assistance. So it's really important that we do understand that, yes, there may be a difference between men and women, but it's not just because of the diagnosis and how we feel it, but our environment, our home, and the way in which we are brought up can have an impact on how we actually see mental health between men and women.
So here I have a question in my mind regarding the conversation you had. Like if somebody has some mental stress, or you can say anything in his mind, or whatever, you can say depression or anxiety or whatever, and they don't convey it, you just discussed earlier, like women is, if she is depressed, she might be crying and speaking to the friend, and people who don't share it and keep it inside, and they don't look for the right people to help, like, so how does it impact on their personalities, and how does it, like, where does it go, and what is the difference between depression, anxiety, panic attacks, and things like that? Like, how would you differentiate it? Because generally we take anxiety and depression, everything we take under
Put it in
same
one.
umbrella, think like, oh, this is same thing. So how would you differentiate it, and how would you, and what kind of help, and where should we, look for help? Like, where should we go if we are going through such situation?
Well, if you are as a person that, cannot tell that you are not being normal, in a sense that, and I don't like to use the word normal, but I mean like as in, every day where you can make decisions, like I said at the beginning, where you have good sleep, you have good rest, because like I said, in this life there is going to be stress, there is going to be some sort of like, discomfort. But if that discomfort is continuous, where it's affecting your mental health, where you cannot make decisions properly, you're irritable, you are having maybe more road rage, for example, you're more angry, you actually are, harming yourself as well as the other person that you're around, then that's when you will notice it for yourself or someone else will notice it, right? Sometimes it can be gone unseen and unknown for a long time because people just think that's their character. They're always angry. They're always stressed out. But then years later, you find out, and I've heard that they've had, a minor heart attack because the stress has now built up in them, where it's caused the organs to have some sort of failure. So it is very serious. And people think that to work hard and not have a rest and, try not to have a balance and you got to work, this much to be successful. I don't buy into that, because at what cost? We find I have a lot of my personal clients who are very highly professional individuals. They're doctors and lawyers. And these are the ones that have the most highly depressed, symptoms, because they burn out very early, very young, and they take the pressure because that's what's expected of them. But it's not realistic for your body. And it's not realistic for a human to actually go under that pressure. And you can go under that pressure up to a certain point. But after that point, then you will find that you will have pain. You will have, maybe, for example, a lot of people that are depressed will have back pain. Or if you have the pain, then that can cause depression. So again, it's very difficult to assess on a whole, because it really does depend on whether the behavior causes the depression or the depression causes the actual behavior. So this is an ongoing study and research, and there's different variations. That's why, to do one-to-one, talking therapy or coaching, not all coaches can actually deal with mental health. I think you have to be slightly differently qualified to do that. And even not all psychotherapists can deal with everything, because CBT, for example, is not widely available where you can say that it's going to work, because some people may not find that it works. But overall, that is the golden standard. Cognitive behavior therapy seems to be the way forward with regards to assessing how that person thinks and feels, changing their mind. And research has shown that there's no difference between the therapy and the medication. But on top of that, that's only for a short period of time. But when you go into the trials and the actual research, the actual therapy can be more effective over the long term, because you're learning new ways of coping that's going to help you later on than just taking the medication. So it just depends. And I think we do need more professionals that's going to be holistic. So you work along the GPs, you work along the psychotherapists, you work along whoever sort of, professional you're up against. So that individual who comes with an issue is getting a holistic approach, which is not there yet. Because you go to the GP, they'll ask you a few questions. And if it's over 2 weeks, for example, that you're feeling like I said, there's this assessment that they have, and they have to question you. And in that question, you have to have, maybe for depression, maybe 4 out of 5 of those assessments that is a tick. And that will say, okay, then you are considered to be depressed because you feel in a particular way. And that's it. For children, it's maybe one of those assessments that needs to be ticked in order for that. So it does depend. And that is something that they go by, is what is it that you feel after a long period of time. And those questions will allow you to see. But for people that are not going for help, they are living with it for a long time. They don't want to accept it. And it is part of life now to feel a little bit of depression, to feel a little bit sad. But if you're going to leave it for too long and you get used to it, it's going to damage your insides. It's going to damage your biology, your functions, your mental sort of decision making. It's really, really important that we don't look at those norms to continue, because that's where the problem is, where we think it's okay to be angry all the time and not address it, to find better ways. Just like how you tell a child, you can be angry and have that emotion, but you're not allowed to hit or throw a ball at somebody. It's the same thing for an adult. So we need to make sure that we have better ways of dealing with the challenges that we have. And if you are irritable, if you are rude, if you're completely, making decisions that is not correct, and people around you watch it, then there needs to be some intervention to say, maybe you need to talk to somebody. Maybe you need to like let things out, because when we keep it all inside ourselves, we do have this way of thinking and believing what we actually, feeling, but it's not necessarily true. But when you talk to a professional, they will analyze it with you, and hopefully you can actually have a better way of not feeling that stress and depression. And there is a difference, because depression has, like I said, a different scale. There's depression where you just feel unmotivated, and the stress can cause, there's gray matter that we have in our brain. It can cause that to deplete. And when that depletes, that takes away your motivation and decision making. So you see, when you have constant stress in your life and you think that this is my job and it's normal, you actually are damaging your brain, and you are taking away that motivation part of it and the decision making part of it. So that's why it's important to understand your mental well-being, and not just know what is the diagnosis, but know what is a healthy mind and how to cope. And we're constantly judging ourselves and someone else, and we're comparing, and that is creating more and more stress and anxiety. And as we are now into the digital world, it doesn't help either. So those are the kind of things that you would say. And when you were asking about this distinguishes between depression, anxiety, and panic attacks, one can overlap, one can cause the other, or one can be separate. It all depends. It could be the situation, it could be what you're doing, it could be a one-off, because you're like, panicking because you're going for an interview, for example, or it could be because you're in a highly demanding job in the city and you're constantly, pressurized. But again, that is causing damage to yourself.
That's true. That's wonderful. So we need to look after our mental health and speak to somebody who can help us and give us the right, direction, and we can help ourselves in that way. So how would you like? If the parents, like for example, because we have been talking about adults, so how we can judge like if our children are suffering from mental health, like if there are, especially the teenage, this is very sensitive age, and children are used to behave in a different way in different angles, because puberty is there and there are so many differences are coming up. So how would you like, if parents have to judge, and if they figure out like there is some problem ongoing, so how they should figure out first and then respond to it, because sometimes our response to the problem is also a problem. So we really need to
Absolutely.
understand, how should we behave, instead jumping up to the conclusion and things like that. How would you
I love
respond
that
to that?
question. No, I love that question, and I like the way you've kind of opened it up, because parenting is really a skill, I think. And I think
That's
in
true.
our community, we don't look at it as a skill. We look at it as a duty to have children once we get married, and that's it. And then also the numbers needs to be in a particular way in order to show that you're in a healthy household, because you've got, 3, 4 boys and a girl, and, all of that. And that is really not important. It really isn't. What's important is what you are raising, but you can't raise healthy-minded children and strong, willpower children and resilient children and those that can cope if you yourself can't cope. Okay, so parents need the actual, I have a lot of parents that come to me saying, could you coach my kid? And I'm like, can you and I speak first? And I think that if I was to help the parent more, then they can be the actual influencer in that house. And usually the children are not necessarily the problem. I find that most of the time. It is
That,
actually the parenting style. And there are different
that's
parenting styles. And again, a lot of culture comes involved. Our religion is very, very pure, and it's very, very easy, but there's a lot of societal pressure. Yes, we want our children to do well academically, and we want them to learn very well, but the way in which how are we supporting them to learn? How are we supporting them to develop? Most parents, they really need to understand the development of a child's mind,
that's true.
right? Because I think even schools need to know it more, and teachers need to know the development of a child's mind, because now everyone's now, diagnosed with ADHD, thinking that, you should be sitting still, when they're not robotic, and they shouldn't be like that. And that's why I'm studying what I'm studying, because I really want to influence in these kind of big institutes. Because I think the way in which we are being institutionalized in schools and the way in which learning is actually causing a problem. It's not just because of the pandemic. I think it's because of the way in which we've been doing things for so many years, and it's not actually
Mm.
serving us. Even in our Islamic schools, let's talk
That's
about
right.
that actually. There's no one
Yeah.
looking over that to say, let's care for that child's mental health when they're like, 4, 5, and 6. And they're made to
Mm.
stand in front and read a surah in front of everyone. If they get it wrong, the teachers are not empathetic. They're making
Mm.
fun of them, and they don't realize that, you know what, you're causing damage to that child. And the
Mm.
parents are putting them there, not realizing what are those teachers teaching them? How are they teaching? Are they even qualified? You might be able to speak Arabic, you might be able to read Arabic, but are you qualified as a teacher to be in that classroom, to know how to help the behavior, which is challenging? That's the difference.
Mm.
And again, it starts in your home, right?
Mm.
Are we just pushing and pushing them because the other child is doing something and the other one is not, or the other family is now, doing, some sort of sports, or they're like, are famous in something which is really, amazing. But how is that relating to the child? A child has got to go through stages, and a child's
Mm.
brain is going through stages. Did you know that we have the prefrontal cortex? I've mentioned it so many times, and I'm going to say it
Mm.
again. That is the decision making part of the brain, where we, try to understand how to, make choices. That
Mm.
part of the brain is only developed at the age of 2022.
Mm.
Now, if you're putting pressure on a child to make decisions from a young age, when they're not even developed, or you're not giving them the support, because not to say that they can't make decisions, but they need more support. Don't tell me that teenagers are just bad because they're teenagers and that's their years. No, it's a developmental stage. And there's a
Mm.
certain function, there's a certain way in which they're behaving, because there's a switch. You don't leave them alone. Most parents leave their children, especially as teenagers, alone, thinking that because now they're at 16 or 15 and 14, they can do things for themselves. No, they need you the most then. They
Mm.
need that role model. They need the influence. They need you to have conversations with them. They're only going outside because they're not getting it in the house.
That's
And
true.
I always say that the mental health of children is the worst, unfortunately, when it's in our community, because we're forcing and forcing and we have no understanding of what it is that needs to be. And then
Mm.
they're having relationships, and then the cycle is just continuous and continuous. And it's
That's
really
true.
not helpful. And they're raising children because it wants to look good in society, when actually that child is not happy.
Sorry to interrupt you, sister. And I would like say, like, don't you think we are like, it's like a some kind of card, or you can say like we are using our children as something like a social, reducing our social pressure. Like, oh, my son is really getting good grades and things like that, and we are putting pressure on our own children by asking them, oh, you have to take like 80%, you have to take 90%, you have to become doctor, and you have to do this, and you have to do that. And apart from that, you just told you mentioned something about the support system when they are making decision. So how would you elaborate that, like what kind of support we should provide when we are asking a child to, for example, if they are choosing a subject for their GCSE, or if they are going for a game, or if they are planning to join a after school club or whatever. So what kind of like support system we must provide them while asking them to take decision, and what we mustn't do it, like while asking them to create that decision.
Very good question. I love that. It's really important to actually address this, and we don't talk about it enough. Firstly, I'm not saying that parents shouldn't have an input. They should have an input, but they need to have the right input. They should be the influencers. They can have an impact on their children where they do become successful. They can have that high flying job, but you need to know your child very well with their limitations. And if you want to encourage them, encourage them. Don't push them and don't force them. And you need to
Mm.
ask them questions. For example, if they are choosing subjects in GCSE, now There may be a child that's really, really passionate about maths and science, and they love it, they enjoy it, and they want to do all of these things, and that's easy. And you're like, okay, you can do maybe, become a dentist, a doctor, a pharmacist, a scientist, whatever, because you're choosing those subjects, you're good at it. But the one that is struggling and they don't know what they want, and they even want to choose the easy thing because that's what they think they're capable of. Now that's when you can step in and say, let's try something. Let's see what you're doing. Let's see where we can help you. And let's see how we can get you somewhere. Because what you're choosing right now is very limiting. And I want to give you the world when you're only choosing a small road and an area, right? So it's the way in which you talk to your child to encourage them, where you're not really forcing them, but you are healthily telling them, try something new and different. Because we get this extreme where they either leave them to do whatever they want, or they force them completely to go in a direction which is just for the parents. If you need to have that balance to firstly build that relationship, that rapport and that connection with your child so you know them well. So the two children in that household, they're not going to be the same. One's going to go in a direction which is more, humanity, research or whatever it may be. The other one might be more science-based. The other one might be, more like sports-based. Whatever it is, happiness is important. But at the same time, I'm not saying that they have to only just be happy, because life's not just about being happy. Life's about being in that challenge and dealing with it. To say, like, listen, if you want to work and earn and have something, especially the pandemic has showed us, there's many professions that did not perform. And there were some professions that was highly in demand. So we need to look at that as a lesson to say, I want to be part of the community to serve. And if I was to be a nurse or, a doctor or whatever, you have to do it with meaning, not just because it sounds good and it gives a good name to it. If you teach your children to choose a career and a path because they want to serve the community and humanity and society, whatever it is that they choose, they will do it with passion. And if you show them the way, give them examples, take them out to museums, show them the direction of this is what it means to be in a particular way. And yes, it takes hard work, but you know what? You're going to struggle with that hard work, but I'm there to support you through that hard work. And if I can't support you myself, I'll get you a tutor, or we'll do extra lessons. We'll talk to your teacher to get you extra, help. Do we have parents talking like that as much? We're just forcing our kids, not realizing, we're not questioning them to even understand what are they thinking and feeling. You have to be a coaching parent, really. In order for them to be successful, you have to understand a parenting style where you can involve yourself in their life and be part of their decision making. Don't let them just choose by themselves, recklessly. Don't be the only one to be the autocratic parent as well, and the dictator parent where you're making the decision. It's about that balance of you giving and taking, knowing their personality, knowing their weaknesses, and say, okay, you may not have liked, geography, but you actually got a really good mark. Did you know that? And you can do this with this subject. You can go into this area. You can go into that. And you know what? You're doing well. And because you don't know what you want right now, let's just work on the subjects that you are good at. Let's choose that. It's an easier sort of way of getting a decent grade, which is going to get you to the next level. And when you get older, you might be able to make your choices then. But you can't force them. You can't dictate to them. And you can't leave it only up to them as well. And the reasons why parents leave it up to them is because they've not been involved in their lives. They've left them. Oh, they're teenagers. I've heard this so many times. They're teenagers now, so they only need to go out. No, you set the rules. You are paying for them. You are providing for them. You are responsible for them. You are accountable for them. Just because other people are doing it in their house does not mean you can stand out and be different in your house. And that's going to help them, because if they have everything also their way, because we have a lot of children now growing up in very well-to-do families, right? MashaAllah, it's amazing. We've got Muslims that have got really highly paid jobs, but unfortunately they're spoiling their children. And they're not actually building a generation that is going to be healthy for the future, because they're lazy. Their parents are giving them everything. They're putting them in private schools, but they're not teaching them the skills of coping. Because you're going to go to work, and if you don't have the right attitude, if you don't know how to deal with failure, you don't know how to deal with people that are difficult, you're going to say, I don't want to go to work. And mom and dad's going to look after me. You're not teaching them, You have to teach them
Yes.
resilience. You have to teach them that there's different characters in this world, and that will help your mental health. Because at the end of the day, what I'm saying is that the reason why a lot of the common mental health is because we don't want to face reality. We don't
That's
want
true.
to actually deal with the challenges that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this life is a test. And as much as we as parents want to sugarcoat and mollycoddle and wrap them in bubble wrap and protect them, we are destroying them because we're not supporting them and walking with them in that, that thin line, which is really crucial. And if they know that they have the support, you can go with them and do it. So what not to do is to dictate. What not to do is leave them alone. You have to be close to them. And you need to be close to them when they are at that age, when they are making choices at 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Everyone pays so much attention, even in madrasa. And when they're like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, after that's finished. And when is it accountable? And when are you even responsible? When are your deeds even written and accountable? When they are older, but they're leaving it then. I don't know. We've got it mixed up. We've got it upside down. We want
I
them to
think
have
so
the
we need to focus
prize.
on. I think so. What I feel is personally, in my experience as well, like we really need to work on individuals and self awareness in particular, so that we can help. Like when an individual is self aware and they understand, like, okay, this is who I am, and that's what where I want to go. So then they will be able to make right decisions for themselves, and then if they have that chemistry with their spouses and they have the family unit, in future, that would help their children as well in the same way. But the problem is that, like, we are living in a, like, especially, like, I feel so, maybe I'm wrong, like we are living in a, like, a 70s or 60s mindset as a couples. If you see, like, okay, if you are not talking to each other, if you are not discussing things with each other, or if you are not helping each other and I mean, you are not being support to each other, because in any relationship, either it's the parenting or it's the spouses, you have to have that mental understanding and support that can take you anywhere, I mean, in your objectives and things like that. But the thing is, when a person is asking for, like, help, they objectify it instead of, like, helping them. And so how would that chemistry we can bring inside, especially in those homes which are already homes, and there are, like, communication gaps, like, in our community as well, and in general too, like, people used to go at work and mothers are working home at, like, some time, and fathers are coming very late, and they are not even discussing what subjects they are studying, and what kind of difficulties they have, and the way you like discuss as well, like, they are not researching the subjects, for example, so that they can give a good or positive opinion, so that the child would be able to see, like, oh, my parent is interested in whatever I am doing, and wherever I want to go, because only then you can build that rapport, the one you were talking about, and things like that. So how would you see this, like, how much work do we need to do on an individual level, like before they get into a marriage contract and after they have child or something like that? What kind of mental, emotional, and understanding, like, kind of state they should have before entering into such things, so that they can make a healthy, productive home, happy home, instead of, like, authoritative or something like that, or where each and everyone is dominating to each other or something like that, because this is something everywhere happening, and it's very painful, honestly speaking, where we are damaging each other. And one more thing I would like you to point out as well, how much impact our words, our, like, gestures, and our, like, the way we convey something to our loved ones, especially the one we are living with, our children, our spouses, our, for example, elders, how much impact their words and the statements they make and the opinion they give to each other, and the kind of, you can say, I think, I mean, emotions they have behind those words and things like that, how much that impact on the emotional life and the mental life of a person. So I would like you to, like, talk about all these aspects I mentioned, so
I
that
would love to.
we.
I wish I had another hour though. I could really answer that in another hour, but I'm going to try and be as brief as possible because of time. Firstly,
Yeah.
yes, we do need to consider our language, and I think it does depend that we can't be oversensitive either. Like people call me
Mm,
boot camp coach because at the end of the day, I think that we need to be real. I know that people
mm,
have a different level of sensitivity, and especially with children. But like I said, you can reprimand them, you can tell them off. But if you do it with love, it wouldn't matter with the words. Just like when they're in school, they have to have rules. And if the rules are not in the house, then they're going to go out one day at 18 and they're going to pretend and think that, they can do the same thing in the house, but then they're going to get into trouble. And there's a lot of Muslims in jail, unfortunately, because they are spoilt at home thinking they can do the same thing outside. And we're not even talking about that either. And that's a whole other topic on its own, right?
that's true.
And on top of that, if you do not have the parenting which is supportive, or they have the actual mindset or the knowledge or the self-awareness, you can still make it work, because nowadays children are much more open to society and information, and they themselves are very resilient. Children, as much as they are formed between 0 and 7, but at the same time, they are easily adaptable to change. And if they are
Mm,
smart enough to say, well, I don't have a role model, I'm going to be one, or I'm going to look for another one outside, just look on a YouTube video, look at some of the lectures, whatever it is, right? If we've got 16-year-olds that are millionaires and talking about coding and programming, they definitely have the intelligence to figure out self-development and how to motivate them and how to work. I don't accept
yeah.
any excuses, especially in the world that we're living in today. Social media is not the
Mm,
problem. It's where you're going to focus on the social media. How are you going to
that's
use it
true.
to your advantage, right? So as an individual from a young age, you don't even see toy stores anymore. They're all on their phones, even at the age of 2 and 3, and they know how to figure things out. So when you come to an age where you don't have parents that are supportive, and you don't have the community around you, or you don't have the facility, you either can get it from school, or you can even look online yourself and you can have that help. There's absolutely no excuse. But yeah, being spoken to in a particular way is great. We all want that, right? But not everyone is going to come to you at that level. And that's why your mental health will suffer if you have an expectation where you have to be constantly pampered around. You need to be able to handle someone that doesn't like you, who's going to critique you, who's going to judge you, and it's going to be okay, because you've got to say, am I going to allow that in my space? Or can I use it to my advantage? Because maybe what they're telling me, I can use to better myself. Or if I feel that they're just saying it to put me down, I don't need to believe them. So there's different scenarios. And this is how we have to be. So the way in which we can be healthy in our mental well-being is to be able to cope, for me, I feel, with challenges, to be resilient, to understand that everybody around us are in their own struggle and battle. And we can't have an expectation that we want all the time. We have to not be attached to the job, to the house, to someone talking to us lovely all the time. It's great if it happens, but if it's not, you need to be good enough and strong enough to be able to handle things yourself. And if you don't like that situation, then don't tolerate it. And there's very healthy ways of dealing with it, whether it's your parents,
Mm,
whether it's your spouse, and things like that. Because again, we're accepting things that we shouldn't be accepting. And we are not living in a country where we do not have that kind of assistance. We're not living in a place, regardless if we're still following cultures for like 70 years old, but we are living in a country which we have no excuse for gaining that kind of help. And we are very fortunate that we can actually do this. So inshallah, I just hope that it's just opened up conversation that, mental health it's a wide topic. We need a season and a
that's
series
true.
of it. And it's not just about
That's true.
diagnosis. It's about dealing with
That's
everyday life and understanding that as a human being, what choice am I making is going to have an impact on my mental state.
that's true. That's true. Thank you so much, Sister Fahima Mohammed, for being with us on the show. I'm really grateful for your
You're
time
welcome.
and the effort you put in. And mashallah, it was really productive discussion, and I've got so much to learn, So thank you so much. And I would ask my viewers to look after yourself by being calm and by being quiet on your own in your homes, and not dealing with the problems you have in your mind and your thoughts. You have to deal with them, and you have to speak to the doctors or the support system you have around you, and see where you're going and how you can survive out of it. So look after yourself and the one around you, and hope will see you next week, inshallah. Have a lovely day, and may Allah protect you all, keep you all safe, healthy, and blessed. Take care. Allah Hafiz.